Thanks.
Okay, it's all good. Yeah.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. We are recording now. Before we start matchings in general graphs, so here by general I mean bipartite and non-bipartite graphs, not just bipartite. Okay. So before we start discussing matchings in general graphs, let's go back to Wissing's theorem and make sure that everyone is um, clear with the proof. Are there any parts of the proof that were not clear to you that you would like to go through again, or you would like to uh, get a better understanding of the argument? Then let's do that first, and then we can move on to matchings in general graphs. Okay. Right. So it's a complicated proof. It's It takes you a few readings to understand it really thoroughly because it has a lot of moving pieces at the same time, right? You, on one hand, you are inducting on the number of edges, but the main idea is to extend a coloring of G minus V to a coloring of G, a proper delta plus one edge coloring, right? But at the same time, inducting on the number of edges gives you this additional freedom to have a big matching in your bipartite graph. So, right, so you have this graph G, you have bipartite graphs corresponding to the matchings for the graph G minus V, right? And at the same time, you have two colorings. You have the original coloring, and then you choose a component P, a path, you swap the colors, and you get a new coloring. So there is a lot of moving pieces at the same time, and keeping track of that can be a bit non-trivial. For several other proofs in the course, like Rutowski's theorem or Brooks' theorem, we were able to break it into smaller parts, some of which were on your assignments or they were covered in previous modules, and that really makes those proofs much easier to understand. The issue with Wissing's theorem proof that we covered, or the one which we chose to cover, is that it's very difficult to break it into smaller parts. Right? It's one monolithic proof with lots of details. Right? But hopefully it was clear. And if not, please ask questions now or later on Piazza, whatever. Okay. All right. So in the end, we got a coloring, and the corresponding bipartite graph had a matching that saturated all the vertices in the neighborhood of the vertex V. So that coloring of G minus V, C prime minus V, we can extend to a coloring of the whole graph, proper delta plus one edge coloring of the whole graph. One thing I want to mention, which I mentioned towards the end of yesterday's lecture, is that all of the proofs that we have done in the matchings module so far, including the edge coloring proofs, they are all constructive proofs. You can basically convert all of them into algorithms. So this proof, you can convert it into an algorithm. You delete one edge and then you recursively color the remaining graph, right? And inside your algorithm, you will basically code things that are going on in the proof, right? So whenever you have a coloring of G minus E, you find this component P, then you do one swapping, and you will be able to extend it to a coloring of the whole graph G, right? So you can get a recursive algorithm from this proof. And the same is true for all of the proofs that we did in bipartite matchings and bipartite edge colorings. Okay. And I'm pretty sure the algorithms you get are actually polynomial time algorithms, but that would require a proof. But anyways, that's not the scope of this. That's not in the scope of this course. Okay. So if there are no questions or concerns pertaining to Wissing's theorem or its proof, right, there is one thing I want to mention. Right. I forgot to tell you about the generalization of Wissing's theorem, because remember Wissing's theorem is for simple graphs, right? Actually, completely forgot to mention this. Give me 1 second. Right. So it's not true for multigraphs. So let's just go through that quickly. Maybe I will continue in the same page.
So for multigraphs, chi dash can be more than delta plus 1, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Means
So let's look
basically,
at,
so
yeah.
it will depend
Mhm.
on the multiplicity, means between two pairs of adjacent vertices.
Right. Yeah. So I'm going to explain that because I haven't defined some of those things, at least not recently. So let's look at this example here. So how many colors do you need to color the edges of this graph properly?
It will be six different colors.
Six different colors, because any two edges here are adjacent with each other, right? It's like
Yes.
coloring the vertices of a complete graph on six vertices. It's basically a similar situation. Any two edges here are adjacent, so you need six different colors. And of course, because you have six edges, six colors suffice. So for this graph, the edge chromatic number is six, right? However, the maximum degree is just four, right? At any vertex, you have four edges. So
So by degree,
clearly,
so I have a question. So degree of a, by degree of a vertex, we mean the number of incident edges, right?
right, in loopless graphs, it is exactly that. But if you have loops, then you would count loops twice, but we don't have loops in this module,
Okay, okay.
right? Okay. So clearly, this graph does not satisfy Wissing's theorem because, and it doesn't matter because it is not a simple graph. It does not satisfy 17.4. Okay. So what's the fix? So it turns out that there is a generalization of Wissing's theorem that is applicable to all graphs, not just all loopless graphs. Right? And what that does is it basically takes into account the number of multiple edges joining any two vertices. Okay, so let's define that. The maximum multiplicity.
So I think
So
it will be, so if the maximum number of edges joining any two vertices is k, suppose, then it will be delta plus k, right?
yeah, the bound is delta plus k.
One delta plus k.
So let's say mu of u comma v, where u and v are distinct vertices of the graph, is the number of edges joining u and v in the graph G. Okay, so it could be 0 if the vertices are not adjacent, otherwise it could be 1, 2, whatever, depending on how many edges we have. And the max mu max of a graph G is basically you take the max over all pairs. You take the max of mu u comma v for all pairs uv of distinct vertices in the graph. Okay. So in this graph, between any two vertices, we actually have exactly two edges. So instead of adding 1, as in the bound of theorem 17.4, we will actually be adding mu of g. And that turns out to be the best bound possible, as is illustrated by this example. Okay, so that's theorem 17.5. If I'm not mistaken, also proved by Wissing, um, probably in the same year it seems, is for any graph G, chi prime is at most the maximum degree plus the maximum multiplicity of the graph. Oh, sorry, mu max. Yeah, here also I meant to write mu max. Okay, good. And apparently you can prove it using similar ideas. I might put it on the assignment, but I have not tried to extend it myself either. So I'll have to try it
So
out
basically,
first.
sir, in particular, if G is a simple graph,
Hmm.
which is at least one edge, then mu max is equal to one.
Right.
So that's why that is a special case of this generalized version.
Yeah, exactly.
Means
Yeah, for
it is more
simple
generalized.
graphs,
Yeah.
yeah, for simple graphs, this is exactly equal to one, right? I mean, so long as you have edges in the graph.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a generalization and it has a similar proof. And it has a similar proof in particular, and we won't do it here. I might put it on the assignment either as a standard or a bonus problem or something. I'm not sure yet. Okay. All right. Any questions or concerns regarding this? Okay. If not, let's move on to
Sir, what will be the
matchings. Yeah, go
lower
ahead.
bound for multigraphs?
Um, well, there is clearly the lower bound of max degree. Since multigraphs include simple graphs, I don't think you can get a better lower bound, right?
Ah, I see. Yeah,
So, I
yeah.
mean,
Delta G
yeah,
includes multiple edges. Yeah.
right, exactly. Right. So the lower bound is still, yeah. So you don't get a good. So this theorem does not give you a very nice classification of multi-graphs, right? In the case of simple graphs, you get a very nice classification. Either they are class one graphs or class two graphs. But here it's the range is much bigger.
And but sir, we can say that this upper bound, which is big delta plus mu max, is the best possible bound because
It is best possible, but Kapil was asking about the lower bound.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It
It is
is best
best possible.
possible because of this example. And this example is not the only example.
How do you deal with loops?
Sorry, there are no loops in this module.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't color a loop because, I mean, in some sense, you want the two edge. If there is a loop, you want these two to have different colors, right? But that's not possible because it's the same edge. So when dealing with matchings and edge colorings, we just don't care about loops.
Oh, actually, like I was thinking, like if you look at edge coloring as vertex coloring of its line graph,
Hmm.
then in some cases, I mean, you can include loops also. I mean,
I see. So the loop will have to have color different from all the edges incident at that vertex.
right.
Hmm. But then you just color the underlying graph, right? And then for every loop, you will have to give it a different. Right. So then you can
Yeah.
take care of the loops, right? If you have 10 loops at a vertex, and that is the maximum number of loops at any vertex, then you will just take the edge coloring of the underlying loopless graph, and you will need 10 more colors for that vertex.
Right. So, but my question was, how do you factor it into new?
Yeah, so here in this discussion, we are only looking at loopless graphs.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can think about generalizing it, but I don't think it's particularly useful. It doesn't give you something more non-trivial as far as I know.
Right.
Right? So it basically amounts to looking at the underlying loopless graph and then extending it somehow, but it doesn't really give you anything very useful. It doesn't give you any new insights.
So
Sir, I
if
still
you
don't
allow,
understand. Oh, okay.
so actually,
Krishnan?
if you are
Yeah,
no
okay,
no,
Aranya.
yeah. So actually, if you are allowed to give a set of colors to a particular vertex, So what we do in coloring, we give a single color to every vertex. But instead, if we give a set of colors to a given vertex, then we can allow loops. Because then the two endpoints of loop, I can give different color. So what I'm
Okay.
saying is that suppose I have given three colors to a vertex U, say 1, 2, 3, and suppose U has a loop. So both the endpoints of the loop will get to different colors from those three colors, 1, 2, 3. So say
Okay.
color 1 and color 2. And suppose there is an additional edge which is not a loop, that is which is a link, which is adjacent to V. Then I can give color 3 to a particular link.
Okay, but then you're just coloring the edges, right? Is that vertex coloring or edge coloring?
No, that is actually no means that is actually vertex coloring, but in a proper vertex coloring, there is a constraint that every edge, the endpoints of every edge get different colors. So if we just allow sets of colors for every vertex, then that particular constant can still be satisfied in this scenario. So every edge, the endpoints of every edge will get to different colors. The edge can be loop also or link also. So we don't need to worry about loopless graphs. So even if there is loops, there will be no problem.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm following the point, but anyways, we can talk about it later.
Yeah, means
So,
anyway that will not be very useful.
okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. Okay. Krishnan, you were saying?
No, like I told, even if you convert it to the line graph, you'll have one vertex and you have a loop, like this graph.
Uh-huh.
So if you're vertex coloring and then if you have a loop, then you can't color the vertex essentially because you can't. You're having a loop. You're having an edge connecting to itself, so you can't connect. You can't color the vertex, right? So
I see. So you're saying that it doesn't really help to look at the line graph?
yeah, that's what I thought. Like,
No,
So
no.
let's,
So a line graph is a graph whose vertices are the edges, right? And there's an edge between two vertices if they share a common edge. So the way I interpret it is there won't be loops in. Yeah, for this particular graph, its line graph won't have loops. In my interpretation.
okay, so we have these three edges here in this small example, right? And what are the edges in the line graph? E1 and
Uh,
E2 are adjacent. E2 and
E2,
E3 are adjacent.
it's a click of size. It's like
Okay, this is it, right?
right.
So can we not say E2 and E2 are adjacent? Or like E2 is adjacent to itself?
Yeah, it depends on how you
Okay,
define
by
the line graph now,
yeah,
right? So, but anyways, let's say every edge becomes a single vertex. Then you just look at any two edges, distinct edges, and you check whether the two edges are sharing a vertex or not.
So this is like looking at the edge coloring of the underlying loopless graph of the original graph.
Right.
so
So
why won't E2 be connected to itself?
it depends on how you define it.
Okay. I see.
Right. So yeah, so we are
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
into
okay.
No, I mean
technicalities
I
and
don't understand why E2 should be connected to itself. Like if E2 was connected to itself, then why not E1 be connected to itself? What is the difference?
No, but so if E2 is E2 is a loop,
No, I'm just looking at
but
some
one
kind
is
of
not a
degree.
loop.
I'm looking at some kind of degree criteria. It's not just about like them sharing.
Like two edges are connected if they share a single vertex. In
Right.
that case, E2 will be connected to E2.
Yeah.
Knowledge.
No, so in that case, E1 should also be connected with itself, right? Because E1 shares a common vertex with itself.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So the point is, are you looking at are you looking at the adjacencies like for distinct pairs, or are you okay? So I am trying to see under what definition will you get a loop at E2?
Yeah, that's what means.
I think
Two edges are adjacent if they share one common vertex, exactly one.
Okay. Yeah. So, anyways, let's not get into. I mean,
Okay.
I don't.
Sir, I wanted to ask
Yeah.
something.
Mhm,
So,
go ahead.
is there any NP characterization of class 1 and class 2 graphs?
Is there any NP characterization? No.
Yes,
No.
not yet found.
No. I mean, so NP. If I want to convince you that a graph is class one, then that is easy, right? I give you a coloring. So yes. So
I
NP
mean,
for class
co-NP, yeah,
one is clear.
co-NP. Co-NP.
Co-NP. Yeah. So co-NP is trickier, right? So
Even NP of class 2 is trickier, I think.
right. Exactly. Exactly. So in the case of class 1, co-NP is difficult. How do I convince you that the graph does not admit a proper
Yeah,
delta H?
ONP of class 1 is equivalent to NP of class.
Exactly. Right. Right. So those are open problems. And the ones that are not open are easy to see that they are not open.
Okay, they are open. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so coming back to this discussion about multiple edges and loops, let's just take it on Piazza because in general we are not going to get any very useful information with regards to this. Okay. So we can discuss further on Piazza, but yeah, typically when you are doing colorings and matchings, you just don't care about loops because you don't get any insightful theorems. Whatever theorems you get, it's like you look at the underlying simple graph and then you do the obvious thing, depending on your definitions. Right? So typically when dealing with colorings and matchings, we just don't care about loops. Okay. So let's not spend too much time on that. All right. Any other questions related to Wissing's theorem?
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah.
So means this question is not regarding in this context. So my question is, suppose you have a complete graph Kn, okay, and means so, and we are only allowed to do only one kind of operation on a graph, eighth subdivision, and we know that for complete graph Kn is chromatic number is n. So is it possible to do eight subdivisions on this complete graph Kn in any sequence and obtain a graph whose chromatic number is 2? Means that is bipartite.
Yeah.
How we can do it means
You think about it. I'm pretty sure for any, at least for a, let's
At
look
least for
at,
K is equal to 3 stroke.
yeah, at least for k equal to 3, it is true, right? For n equal to 3, right? You can take
Just
a
subdivide
subdivision
every
of
age,
k,
I think.
you'll get a 6 cycle.
Yeah, subdivide every age and the points in the age and the original vertices form a bipartition.
Right. That's right.
okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right? So yeah, so in general, subdivisions and minors, they don't preserve the chromatic number. They don't have any close connection with the chromatic number. There are some interesting conjectures if you're interested in reading, but they are one directional. So I don't remember the conjectures right now, but if you're interested, then this is beyond CS6240, and this is actually related to vertex colorings. You can take a look at Hadwiger's conjecture.
So I had means I have read this means both
Okay.
Hajos and Hadwiger.
Yeah, so you can read about it, and there is some interesting connection between colorings and subdivisions and minors. I don't remember the details, so you can go through that probably on Wikipedia or any standard source. Okay.
So is it true that subdivisions in general decrease the chromatic number?
No,
Okay.
as far as I know, that is not true. I think you can find counter examples to that. Yeah.
Yeah, but means for any graph G we can decrease its chromatic number through a sequence of 8 subdivisions. So basically what I'm
Yeah,
saying
you
is
can generally you can get a subdivision that would be bipartite if I'm not mistaken. For
yeah,
any graph, this is probably possible.
yeah, but not through every possible subdivision we can decrease the chromatic number.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, are there any other questions which are more pertinent to what we are doing right now? All right. So let's switch to matchings now in general graphs. Okay. So I want to go back to one of the previous discussions we had. Let's go to matchings versus vertex covers. Right? And let's see what were the things we observed there. So in particular, we proved the Koenig-Egervary theorem, right? Which says that for a bipartite graph, the size of a maximum matching is exactly equal to the size of a minimum vertex cover. Right? In other words, you can actually convince someone that a matching is maximum in a bipartite graph. You just show them a vertex cover of the same size, which will exist if the matching is maximum. And that means that the given matching is indeed maximum. Okay. Good. So let's look at vertex covers in bipartite graphs, and let's try to generalize that to see if we can get similar upper bounds on the cardinality of a matching in any graph. Right? In particular, we want to focus on graphs that are not bipartite, but the theory will be applicable to all graphs. So let's go back to vertex covers in bipartite graphs. Okay. So let's say G, let me now use, yeah, G is fine. Let's say GXY is my bipartite graph. What is a vertex cover? A subset of the vertices is a vertex cover if each edge E equal to UV has at least one of U and V in the set S, right? In other words, the complement will be a stable set. This is a vertex cover if and only if S bar is a stable set. Okay. And clearly in a bipartite graph, GXY, both X and Y are vertex covers. Right? So in particular, if I take a minimum vertex cover, it will have size at most X and at most Y, right? It will have to be less than equal to each of those. For a minimum vertex cover S, all right. So what does a vertex cover look like in a bipartite graph? I want to look at a general vertex cover, not at X or Y. So let's consider a vertex cover that is that has some vertices in X and some vertices in Y. Right? Let's say I have some vertices like this. Okay. So maybe let me make this slightly bigger. Okay. And let's say so let's suppose all my edges in the graph, they go like no, not like this. They go like this. Okay, supposing all my edges of the graph, of the bipartite graph, they look like this, right? In this case, there is an easy vertex cover that we see, right? S intersection X, and this is S intersection Y. This is a vertex cover, right? And this would be S bar intersection Y. So X is my top and Y is my bottom. And this is S bar intersection X. Okay. Good. So if this is a vertex cover, then it already tells you that the size of a maximum matching in this graph is at most 5, right? So in our example, the cardinality of S is equal to 5, and this implies that any maximum matching or any matching has size at most 5. And this is an interesting vertex cover because in this example that I've drawn, y has 6 vertices and x has 7 vertices. So of course a maximum matching cannot have more than cardinality more than 6. But this vertex cover is telling you that the cardinality cannot be even 6. It has to be less than equal to 5. So that's a more interesting vertex cover than x or y because it gives you a better bound in this example. So what I want to do now is I want to visualize this example in a different way. I want to redraw this and try to think of a different way of looking at this example. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to redraw it as follows. Let me put the vertex cover vertices on the top. So this is S intersection X, and this is S intersection Y, and this is the whole set S. Right. And let me put the other vertices on the bottom. So this is S bar intersection Y, and these 4 vertices is S bar intersection X. Where do the edges are? Where are the edges? The edges go between, they go like this, they could go like this. And now we could also have edges joining vertices here, right? This is the previous top left and bottom right. So we could also have edges like this.
So there cannot be no edge within S bar.
Right. S bar is an independent set as we discussed. It's a stable set. Right? Yeah. So I want to look at it this way. So we have these 5 vertices in S, and when we delete them, we get a bunch of isolated vertices. And this tells us, this gives us an upper bound on the size of a maximum matching. But rather than looking at it from the vertex cover point of view, which is the first drawing, I want to look at it from this second drawing's point of view. Right? So I want to argue that the cardinality of any matching is at most 5 by looking at this drawing and not by looking at the previous drawing. So what's happening? We are deleting 5 vertices. So what I want you to think about is consider the graph G minus S. Consider G minus S. So you delete 5 vertices, and now what is your graph? It is a bunch of K1s, right? It is 8 isolated vertices. 8 isolated vertices. And the cardinality of S is exactly 5. So can anybody explain why is the size of a maximum matching 5? Sorry.
So if there exists a matching, so your question is why size of any matching is at most 5, right?
Yeah. So every edge in the matching has at least one vertex in S.
Right.
So and
So if there exists a matching with size at least 6, then any vertex cover must pick at least one endpoint of
I
every
don't
edge
want
of
to
the
look at vertex covers. We are not going to look at vertex covers, right? We want to look at this drawing. So let me give you one more tool to think about. So M is a matching. So let's say M is a matching, and U is the set of M exposed vertices. Okay. So this is a point I was missing myself. Okay. So rather than telling me that the size of the matching is at most 5, can someone tell me how many exposed vertices must I definitely have for any matching of this graph by looking at this drawing? So I want a bound. I want a
3, right?
3. 3. Why? Why 3?
Because there are only edges from upper part to lower part.
Okay. And but there are also edges on the top, but that's okay. So what is 3? How did you get 3?
That's because uh, 6 edges from the
Yeah,
bottom can't belong to a matching. I mean, one second.
because like the top vertices will be matched to some vertices in the bottom part, and no more of the bottom part can be matched now.
Right. But in particular, you said 3. So what? How did you get 3?
8
Did you do
minus 5.
8 minus 5? 8 minus 5. Right. Because you have 8 vertices that are isolated. Sorry.
Nothing, sir.
Okay. You have 8 vertices in S bar, right? They are isolated. They don't have, it is a stable set. So they cannot match with each other. In any matching, the only way to match those vertices is to match them to vertices in S, right? But S has only 5 vertices. So the best you can do in life, in this example, is you can match 5 of those vertices with 5 vertices on the top. But then you will have still left 3 vertices which are not going to be matched. Okay? So the best you can do is you can take 5 vertices here and match them on the top somehow. But even in that case, 3 vertices will be left exposed, unmatched. Okay? And notice that to get a maximum matching is the same as minimizing the number of M exposed vertices. Okay, so I'm trying to look at it from a different point of view, because this point of view turns out to be the correct point of view to generalize this to non-bipartite graphs. Okay, so let's put some observations. Observation: if G is a graph, M is a matching, and U is the set of M exposed vertices. Observe that the number of vertices in the whole graph is equal to 2 times the number of vertices that have been matched, the number of matching edges, right? So if you have 5 matching edges, then that accounts for 10 vertices. Those are saturated vertices, and plus you have the unsaturated or exposed vertices, right? In other words, the cardinality of a matching M, right? How do you write it? You take the number of vertices minus U divided by 2, right? And this implies that maximizing M is the same as minimizing the number of exposed vertices, right? This is clear. So it will often be more useful to think of the number of exposed vertices rather than the size of the matching. It might be more convenient in certain situations. So it's good to note these two different viewpoints of looking at the size of a matching. Okay. All right, now let's go back to this example. So here we have 5 vertices, and after deleting these 5 vertices, we got 8 single vertices, 8 copies of K1, right? And using this, we were able to conclude that the cardinality of the number of exposed vertices is at least 3, right? And now, if you apply this observation that the number of the cardinality of M and the cardinality of U are related in this way, you can conclude that the size of the matching is at most 5. Okay, I'll leave that as a do it yourself. It's just arithmetic. All right.
So basically, the formula which you just wrote means cardinality of M equal to mod V minus mod U by 2.
Hmm.
From there only it comes because we know
Exactly.
mod V is, yeah, mod V is 8 and the mod U is at least 5. So from there mod M will be at most 5. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Good. So here the what is the mod V again? Sorry, it's more, right? It's 5 plus 8, 13, right? So it's 13 minus 3 divided by 2, right? Okay, and that's exactly 5. Good. All right, so now I want to generalize this drawing. Let us generalize this. So supposing instead of single vertices, instead of getting 8 isolated vertices, supposing I get something more interesting, can I still make this conclusion? Supposing I delete 5 vertices from my graph, but now maybe I don't get 8 isolated vertices, but I get 8 components. Then can I still make such a claim if the components satisfy some conditions? What is so special about isolated vertices? I don't think there is anything special. What if the vertices, some of the vertices become triangles? Supposing I have a situation, I have a set of vertices in my graph G.
So basically,
Let's
if
say,
it is a
yeah,
triangle, then from every triangle you can get at most one edge.
right. But now can you generalize it further? Supposing I have 5 vertices, and instead of getting 8 copies of K1, I get some copies of K3. Let's say I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So we
Supposing
can
these
look
are
at
my,
the
yeah,
so we can
go
look
ahead.
at the number of odd components of G minus S.
Okay, why odd? What is so special about odd components?
Because if we take any odd component,
Hmm.
it has odd number of vertices.
Hmm.
So any matching, any matching in that particular component
Hmm.
cannot saturate every vertex of that component.
Right, okay, good. Okay,
So then in that case, that component can contribute at least one to the set of exposed vertices.
right. Uh-huh. And the only way to not contribute one would be to,
Would be to have a perfect matching.
no, for a particular component. If I look at a particular component, if I don't want any exposed vertices, what should I do? What must I do?
You must join it to S.
All right. The only way to not get an exposed vertex from this component is to match one vertex with a vertex in S. Right? That's the only way to make sure that this component does not contribute to the number of exposed vertices. Right? But S has only 5 vertices. And I have drawn 8 components here, which are odd cardinality. Each component has odd number of vertices. So at best, what I can do is I can take 5 of these components and I can match all of them one vertex each to the S vertices. But even then, I will be left with 3 components that cannot be matched, that cannot match a vertex into S. And so each of these components will contribute at least one vertex to the set U, where U is my exposed vertices. U is the M exposed vertices, and M is our matching. Okay? So let's make this observation. What am I saying? Supposing G is a graph and M is some matching. and S is some subset of the vertex set, any subset. Okay, and let's say U is a set of M exposed vertices. Right. Now let's look at this graph with respect to the set S. So if I delete the set S, I'll draw a 5 again, why not? If I delete this set S, my graph may have some components which have an odd number of vertices. So maybe I'll draw 8 as usual. And my graph may have some components which have an even number of vertices. So these are the even components of G minus S. It is possible that the graph G minus S is connected, but that doesn't matter here for this discussion. And these are the odd components of G minus S. So the claim is that the number of exposed vertices is at least a certain quantity. Can anybody say what that quantity is?
The number of odd components of G minus S.
Right? Just that or something else?
minus the size of S.
Minus the size of S. Number of odd components of G minus S minus the cardinality of S. You will always have at least these many unmatched vertices for any set you look at, right? This quantity could be completely useless. It could even be a negative number. But if it is a positive number, then it is actually giving you some useful information, right? So I'm not saying that every set is going to be useful, but there could be sets in your graph which actually give you useful information, useful upper bounds on the size of the maximum matching, or equivalently, useful lower bounds on the number of exposed vertices, right? Okay. And now you can prove the following. So maybe we should introduce some notation. We will use this notation. Sorry, maybe I should say C odd of G is number of components of G that have odd number of vertices. Right? Right? And these components that have odd number of vertices, I am also referring to them as odd components. Right? Okay, and the other components are even components. Okay, so in other words, what we have proved is that the number of exposed vertices is going to be at least the number of odd components in this graph G minus S minus the cardinality of S. This is true for every subset S of the vertex set. Okay, and now if you combine this observation with our previous discussion here, you can get an upper bound on the size of the maximum matching. So the size of the maximum matching is going to be at most, let's see. Right, so instead of U, I will put the lower bound. Right, so it is going to be at most the number of vertices of the graph minus this quantity divided by 2. Okay, and this is true for every single subset of the vertex set of the graph and for every matching M of the graph G. Okay, and this is in some sense a generalization of our discussion of vertex covers. Vertex covers are not the right notion to look at in the case of non-bipartite graphs, right? Because in general, the size of maximum matching can be strictly less than the size of a minimum vertex cover, right? So when you try to generalize this concept of vertex covers, it turns out the correct way of looking at it is actually in this way. And we will complete this discussion tomorrow. So we will, not tomorrow, tomorrow is a holiday. So we'll continue with this discussion on Friday at 9 o'clock. Okay. But are there any questions regarding how we got this inequality?
So is the class over?
Yeah. The class is over. Feel free to leave. But if there are any questions or concerns, I'm still here for 5 minutes.
Okay, sir. Then I'm leaving, sir. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Okay, sir. Bye, sir.
Okay. See you. Bye.
So one thing,
Yeah, Ganesh.
so we are taking this quantity, right?
Right.
Okay, so we have this, but like we are not considering like matching edges that will be there in each of the sort components, right?
Right. So we are saying that no matter what you do, no matter how you match the vertices inside the odd component, you will always have at least one vertex that cannot be matched inside the odd component.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the main observation, that because the component has an odd number of vertices, you have to match at least one vertex into S. Otherwise, you will get one exposed vertex from that component.
Yeah. Okay. So, like the number of edges between S and the odd components will be something like uh, the quantity, like that can at max be mod S.
Well, you could have lots of edges, right? Between what you could do is every single vertex of S, you can join it to every vertex of the rest of the graph.
Yeah. So, like the number of edges between that S and the odd components that will be at max mod S. So,
Why
Okay.
at most modest? You mean the number of matching edges?
yeah. Number of
Okay,
matching
number
edges.
of matching edges. Yes, because you have 5 vertices in S in this example, the best you can do is you can match 5 components, one vertex into this set,
Yeah.
right? If for any component you match 3 vertices into the set, then you will have even lesser chance for other components to be matched.
Yeah.
So in some sense, the best you can do is you just match one vertex of each component into the set S. And even then you will be left with 3 components, right?
Yeah. We'll be left with C order G minus S
Exactly.
modest components.
Exactly. So 8 minus 5 in this example, right? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now I get it. I think.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we'll continue this discussion next time. So this is a lower upper bound on the size of a matching, right? You can get this bound from any set S. It may not be a
Yeah.
useful bound. What we will actually prove in the next lecture is that you can actually always attain this with equality. That is one of the main results of this module for non-bipartite matchings.
I think I've seen the theorem somewhere before. But I
Yeah,
don't
it's
remember the
basically
name.
Tut-Birch formula. That's generally what it is called.
Okay.
Right? So yeah. Okay, good. Any other questions or concerns?
Nothing else.
Okay, so maybe I'll just stop recording if you can stay back for a minute or two.